Why is it if you skip a warm-up, you're almost guaranteed to get injured? Let's take a look at this great question. Recently, I was having a phone consultation with a father of a young motocross racer, and his athlete unfortunately keeps getting injured over and over and over again. And we started talking about what is, if you think about this from a standpoint of a pattern, when somebody gets injured, similar to getting sick, there's obviously something that's amiss, and if we don't address it, the pattern is going to continue to persist. I live in Florida. It's hot almost every day of the year, and after speaking with this dad, what we found out was his athlete was mistaking the idea that because he's physically warm because of the heat and humidity of Florida, that he didn't need to warm up. And that's the genesis behind this video, which, you know, when I hear a comment like that, that makes sense, right? Especially when you're dealing with a young athlete. If I'm sweating profusely because of the air temperature and the humidity level, if I'm covered in motocross gear from head to toe, if I'm on a hot motorcycle, my perception, especially without any level of knowledge, is I'm physically warm, so hence I'm warmed up. And this is where I want you to kind of decipher between being physically warm and being metabolically warmed up. Now, when we're looking at the subject of an injury, why would somebody be getting hurt over and over and over again? And that's because the body's always going to centralize the majority of the blood around the heart. It's the number one organ that keeps us alive, so the body's always going to make it a priority. Now, even though the air temperature may be warm, you've got to recognize the warm-up is sending a communication through the body. That communication is done through hormones, that the body's getting ready to do work. And this is where the subject of an injury is going to have a completely different paradigm shift. When you don't warm up, the muscles in their range of motion are not optimized. When you don't do a physical warm-up, if you think about it from the standpoint of hormones communicating that we're getting ready to do work, there's a plethora of bodily adjustments that are taking place. When a muscle contracts, it creates heat. That heat creates vasodilation. Doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but that vasodilation is bringing in oxygen-rich, nutrient-rich blood. You're getting ready to take your heart rate up. It'd be great to have those channels opened up so all of those nutrients and the oxygen is flowing in easily. When you are starting to activate a warm-up, the actual tissue itself, again, this is at a neurocommunication level, it actually starts to relax and it lengthens. So now you have optimized biomechanics. A muscle that's at full length and properly warmed up will contract harder, i.e. raw power. It'll contract for a longer period of time before it becomes fatigued, muscular endurance. When your body produces a high level of lactate, when the body's adequately warmed up, it grabs that lactate and is able to get it out of the system much, much quicker. Think about it. You just open the width of the river so you can get down it much quicker. When we come back to the subject of injuries, this is what I find so interesting. A muscle tissue that is cold, even though the air temperature may be warm, the physical muscle is not warmed up for the demands of the sports specificity you're about to submit it to. And then think about it. You're going from essentially idle to a major output. If that tissue is not warmed up from the inside out, that's where we run the risk of a muscular tear. That's why I thought this was pretty interesting. A warm-up, or a lack thereof, is the genesis of an injury. Now let's take it one step further. When you're sitting there, right here, you're watching this video, look down at your Garmin and see what your resting heart rate is. What is your heart rate right now while you're listening to this video? Now imagine adding 100 to it within 30 to 45 seconds. Think about the amount of torque and tear that you could put on a cold tissue. There's your risk of injury. But there's yet another dynamic. If you're not adequately warmed up, your heart rate goes from 80 to 180. You're going to get what we call a lactic acid dump. And that's going to, unfortunately, it's going to burn. It's going to have a negative impact on your biomechanics. And if you're in something like motocross or BMX or something, all of a sudden now you take a big digger because your heart rate went from 80 to 180 and you have this lactic acid dump, your chance of getting hurt goes up exponentially. If you're a triathlete or you're a runner and you don't warm up, you go from 0 to race pace, the body's going to load up with lactic acid. You're going to essentially blow up and go backwards. Unfortunately, that adds to the risk of muscle tears over and over and over again. And what becomes dangerous is if we don't recognize that we've created a microfilament tear, that microfilament tear ends up turning into scar tissue. Scar tissue is not flexible. So due to the inelasticity of that, now your sport-specific biomechanics are negatively impacted. So now you have an injury that creates scar tissue. You lose your optimized biomechanics, which now makes you slower. You see how not warming up has a multitude of, I hate to use the negative, but there's a lot of negative ramifications not warming up. I have plenty of videos that are out there discussing the warm-up, how to do it and do it correctly. I would encourage you to watch those. But as I say at the end of every video, if I've created any questions, or if maybe you've got a question that you've been trying to get answered and you can't get an answer for it, or a legitimate explanation, please do me a favor, reach out to me. contact@coachrobb.com. I want to remind you that we put out a video every day, so please make sure that you like, subscribe, and turn on those notifications. We'll be putting out another video tomorrow, and I hope to see you then.